Hello, everyone. Welcome to Worcester People of Color Unseen Photographs, a presentation and discussion of William S. Bullard's photography with Frank Morrill. I want to extend a warm welcome to the folks who have registered from across the United States tonight. Tonight's discussion is brought to you in collaboration with the Worcester Black History Project and Worcester Historical Museum. Founded in 2018, the Worcester Black History Project recognizes and celebrates the experiences of Black people in Worcester and the surrounding areas, and encourages the preservation and sharing of this history through scholarly educational outreach and programming. My name is Cecilia Hilton, and I am a member of the Worcester Black History Project. I am excited to introduce our topic for tonight and then turn it over to our speaker, Frank Morrill, and our moderator, Deborah Hall. Maya Angelou once wrote, "For Africa to me is more than a glamorous fact. It is a historical truth. No man can know where he is going unless he knows exactly where he has been and exactly how he arrived at his present place." Black people are a diasporic people, sharing a common root on the African continent with branches that grow, intertwine, and expand across the world. African Americans in Worcester and many other Northern American cities can not only trace their ancestry back to African nations, but to Southern and Caribbean cities, towns, and plantations. A story of multiple migrations across generations in the pursuit of freedom. I find myself reflecting on this quote from Maya Angelou as I think about our topic tonight and the sources that we will explore. In 2003, Charlton resident Frank Morrill purchased a collection of photographs by a white Worcester photographer, William Bullard, dating from 1897 to 1917. Of the thousands of images in this collection, a significant amount of photos depicted Black Worcester residents, a surprising find considering that people of color made up 1% of the city's population at that time. Within this collection are hundreds of images of everyday Black Worcester residents, many of whom resided in the Beaver Brook neighborhood with their children, neighbors, and loved ones. Bullard took careful notes on the people he photographed, so that today we can identify nearly 80% of the people in his photos, a rare quality for a photographic collection from this time period. In identifying the people in Bullard's photos, common themes emerge around the aftershocks of the African diaspora, the meaning of migration and making a new home, and the experience of building community with Black people, escaping the horrors of slavery, the failures of the Reconstruction era, and the terrors of Caribbean plantation. We do service to Angelou's historical truth by exploring these never-before-seen images from this collection and bringing these photographs to life through discussion. Tonight, we explore where we have been and how we got here, with the hope of better understanding where we are going. For tonight, we will start with Frank Morrill's presentation of William Bullard's photography, and then Worcester Black History Project founder and tonight's moderator, Deborah Hall, will join Frank in discussion. We encourage you to enter your questions in the chat box throughout the presentation, and we will cue them for our moderator. A reminder that our time together will end at 8:30 p.m., so we will focus on balancing your questions with providing Frank Morrill with the time needed to go in depth. And now a bit on our speaker tonight. Frank Morrill is a lifelong educator, teaching science, history, and law for 33 years at Millbury High School. He has written several local history books that make reference to the Bullard collection, and it was this interest that led to his acquisition of William Bullard's glass negatives in 2003. Today, he is an active Charlton community member and contributor to Worcester County history. I am excited to now turn it over to Frank Morrill.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for coming. And now we shall begin. We're looking at a first picture here is of William Ward, born in 1880 down in New Bern, North Carolina, migrated to Worcester. We'll see more of the Ward family coming up, but I'd like to give you some information about the photographer, the reason we're here tonight. We take a look at Bill first. There he is sitting on a rock next to his farm, his family's farm on Bullard Road in North Brookfield. I don't think he would ever think at that moment that he was sitting there just 6 years before he took his own life, smiling, thinking that his collection, a very valuable historical collection, would end up on a shelf, unknown, for over 100 years. I'm not sure he would ever realize that there was a group of people that would keep this collection together. This fragile glass collection was kept together in pristine condition in the same hand-labeled boxes that he put them in. It's kind of neat when you're looking at his handwriting and seeing all of that and wondering what was he thinking at that moment when he did this. And as you go through, you see Bill had them for 24 years, and his brother, who had no interest in them, kept them for 40 years on his shelf. Their postman, Frank Morrill, lived in East Brookfield. He knew they were there, and he bugged Charlie for a number of years until Charlie got old and sold them to him. He brought him to East Brookfield, put him on a shelf, and then living with him was his grandson, Dennis LeBeau. And so when he passed away, Dennis was still there, and they stayed there for 45 years until I purchased them in 2003. You know, a lot of chance happenings bring us here tonight, and you'll see some of them as we go through this. There's Bill right there on the right in front of his farm, and in between Bill and his brother Marcus is his cousin, and a little kid down there that you see, Robert Bullard. Interesting little guy. He took pictures of him from being a baby up. We have many, many pictures of the family. I got to do a little research and find Robert's two daughters. They're in their 80s. They didn't have a lot of recollection of great Uncle Bill. They didn't even know he was a photographer because they came along much after he died in 1918. But they did provide some valuable insight into the home. The home is gone, and you'll see it coming up pretty quick. It's no longer there. But what they did was be able to verify some of the pictures, outside, inside, and tell me something about the family. And that's always very helpful. Bill had a very unusual personality. Many of his pictures, whether it's soldiers or other pictures of him, you shall see, he's got a smile. That picture tells you a lot right there. That's his cousin Bertie and his grandmother with him. He was a jokester. He had soldiers doing all kinds of strange things with logs and sticks and all kinds of different platforms that they were on, and strange dress and holding up rifles in odd positions. Bill got around a lot, and there's some evidence of that as you look at the shoe right there. He did indeed do a lot of walking. Before we go further, I might tell you that you're seeing little dates down in the bottom on the left. I put those in. I normally save them, but I put them in most of the photographs, so you'll get an idea of when he took the picture. When it says circa, that means I can date it within a year, but I'm not positive, but I'm close. You take a look at the red circle, that means no one's seen that picture before. Here's Bill standing near the farm, holding one sunflower while he put his derby hat on another. He was very good at selfies. You saw that early selfie. There was a way to take a picture of yourself fairly close up at that time with a long cable, or you could set the camera like he often did and had someone else click the shutter. He used glass plate negatives that were already exposed with material, so it wasn't like the Civil War glass plate negatives where you had to slop all this stuff on, which was kind of dangerous if you did it all the time. Here he is at Camp Framingham. There he's got his little chef's hat on, and the guy's holding up something, I don't know what, and he's got there. But he spent a lot of time at Camp Framingham. Here he is again. He's got gloves on, believe it or not, and he's washing something. He's got one more stripe, same year. And here is a great shot of Bill. Always like this. One of the last ones I found. People have not seen that one. He's got all his medals. It's a Massachusetts militia. The only flaw in all of this is that Bill never served in the military at all. I did check everywhere around New England. We did every place. He did live in Rhode Island for a very short time. He did not serve in any militia at all. So we're of the opinion that it was his brother Henry's uniform. He did serve, and he did serve at Camp Framingham for several years. By the way, Camp Framingham, for some of you who are wondering, some of you from around this area have traveled to other states that are listening in tonight. If you go on the Massachusetts Turnpike, there's a state police barracks in Framingham. It was part of that area right there. It was an airport at one time. That is the camp. He was very fond of taking pictures of camps. This is home. You can see that it was a going concern, a nice home at the end of a street. Those from any familiarity from this area, it's right near Brookfield Orchards, which is still in business today. This is a time when no cars, they were invented at this point, but they were in horse and buggy. His is, I would say, he had all the trappings of a middle-class person at that time, even though he was a farmer. He didn't seem to want for much. Down in the middle of the picture next to the stove, he's got a nice stiff bear, little Teddy Roosevelt bear. But how did I know that's his study? Well, that picture right there is the one that I just showed you right here. He loved his own pictures and he put them on the wall. That picture right there is a picture of the statue on the Common at City Hall. It's a great picture of the Civil War statue, the 1874 Civil War statue. He took an unusual picture here. That's a room on the way out to the barn, and it had its own nice fireplace. Part of that fireplace is still there, caved in. The house is completely gone. It's just a shell now and a cellar hole. But he did something unusual here. He helped me out. He took a picture of his camera without him in it, of course. Looking at that camera, I was able to narrow it down to the kind of camera he would have used. And I'm pretty sure from researching this camera that it held only 3 sizes, and Bill had all kinds of sizes. He had 3 1/4 by 3 1/4 negatives, and unusual. The square negative was very unusual. He had 3 1/4 by 4 1/4, 4 by 5, 5 by 7, 8 by 10. So he would have had another camera besides this one. I would love to have had the camera as part of the collection, but I do not. Bill committed suicide in 1918. And the cause of death, as you see, there was despondency as cause of suicide. He was 41. That's his grave site right there in Putnam Heights Cemetery. He was always living with his mother, whether it was in 1894 to 1908 in Worcester, or even earlier when he was a child, born in 1876, as you see. And his mother died shortly before this, just a couple of weeks before he committed suicide. Other obituaries, the one in North Brookfield tells a story of a Bill Bullard who was no longer able to practice his trade after 1917. So whatever his ailment might have been, and we don't know, I would like to know more. He was indeed despondent according to this. All of this work leads to some research questions. And I'll throw some up here for you to look at, you can think about. Where and how did he learn this remarkable skill? We're going to see later that experts have looked at all these photographs and they have told me and Professor Greenwood, who's been working with me, you'll hear more about her coming up, that his expertise was quite strong and that he was able to demonstrate skills that most amateur photographers could not have known. He did not have a studio. We're going to see his pictures were outside, on location, which makes him unique. His pictures were, at best, I would say, hurried. In some cases, you would see he would put a backdrop up, and he wasn't real good at ironing the backdrop, so you'll occasionally see some of the humor in that. There were times at this time when you could send away for kits to tell you how to put pictures together. And of course, the photography world exploded in 1880 when Eastman bought up the rights to come up with dry plate negatives. No longer did you have to go under a camera and make sure that you slopped the right liquid on the piece of glass. The glass came already set for that. and that exploded the amateur photography. Why did he take such a strong interest in the African American, Native American community, hence what we call the people of color community? We don't know. One theory, we have a few, but one theory that I would like to research more is that his grandfather, who lived around the corner from him in Worcester, off of Park Ave, lived at 14 Birch Street. He was a Civil War soldier, and he was in several battles and came back to tell about them. Many soldiers who went south saw the plight of the blacks and came back with lots of stories. Some came back with blacks, and as did ministers. Maybe Bill, who lived near him, learned a lot from him. Maybe he had stories to tell him, and he took an interest. We don't know yet. Did he frequently sell his photographs as a means of support? Well, in his logbook, which I'll show you a picture of coming up, he did mention a couple times 10 cents, 15 cents. He even got 75 cents for one. I hope that was a good picture. Not many of those pictures exist, and we'll talk about that later. And what inspired him to travel to so many communities? He wore those shoes out, as you saw, because Bill went on horseback, he walked, he rode a bicycle and strapped everything to his back. He went in horse and buggy, he went in a buckboard. He went as far as Buffalo, New York in 1901 to an exposition and took all kinds of pictures there, by train, obviously, and of course he traveled by trolley. There is no evidence that he traveled by car. Cars were fairly new then, but many people had them. I have no evidence that he traveled by car. He was a photographer with many, many interests. 50 pictures of trolleys with him. Yes, I know I need to find other things to do, but I couldn't help it. I counted them. 150 trains and depots. 300 ice wagons. And by the way, I failed to mention earlier, 44 different communities that he traveled to. And the big portion of these ice wagons were Walker Ice in Worcester, the famous Walker Ice. They had a big plant on Coe's Pond, one on Institute Park, yep, even that little pond, and they had one at Indian Lake, 3 of them, 3 big ones. 600 soldiers training. He was fascinated, maybe because his brother was in. And 242 African-American, Native American, or related. 40% of the sitters, the people that sat for the photographs, were Black or Native American. They made up only 1% to 2% of the Worcester population. That's a stunning difference. He was also a school photographer in North Brookfield, East Brookfield. Took a number of them in Holden and in Worcester. The ones in Holden are great because he named the teacher and he named the school. And then I guess he just got tired and didn't name any of the other schools. And now the discovery. This is a picture of my granddaughter at 10. She's now coming up on 18 and will be going to college in the fall. If you see the date, 2013, Hannah and I had been working on a book of Worcester. She had an interest in history, and I asked her if she would like to sit, photograph, and write a book with me. And she did. And she did 2 more after that, one on Charlton and one on Spencer. I'll always be grateful for that experience. And hopefully I have a grandson who's 7, Owen is 7, and he has an interest in history already. So maybe, just maybe, you'll be sitting listening to me with a picture of Owen up there someday, because I hope he'll take that interest further. I hope he'll write a book with me. And maybe he'll be the person that carries forth more research on the negatives I will be showing you soon. So hi, Owen. What a discovery it was. She was sitting downstairs in my home, and we were looking at new pictures, getting ready to put the book together for Worcester. Needed a couple extra pictures. I thought she'd need some expertise. So I went over to the big pile of boxes of glass negatives. Most of them have been put away, and I grabbed 3 randomly, and they were streets. And I said, as you're looking at these, Hannah, if it has something we can recognize, like the name of a street, anything, a building, we can find that, put it aside. So as she was looking through, she held one up and said to me, oh, what's this a negative of? Well, it wasn't a street at all. It was this negative. And that was our discovery. I said, I don't know. I think that's an African-American woman. And then I took it as a teaching moment as a teacher, and I told her about Negro, colored, African-American, Black. And I went through that, and I said, just put it aside. And she did. And we came back several months later to begin a book on Charlton. And there it was sitting on the desk down there, and she chided me a bit and said, "You didn't put this away. You always tell me to put stuff away." Well, luckily I did not. She picked it up, she kept looking at it, and she said to me, "Why does it have a little 76 scratched in it?" Well, if you look down the bottom left, you'll see a 76 there. It's not the 76, I just put it there, but on the other side, it would be backwards. There is a little 76, tiny, I could barely see it, and I said, I have no idea. And I thought about it for a while, and then I thought, wait, when I bought this collection, there were some papers that came with it. There was an old account book, like a log book. There were numbers and things in it. Do not tell me he wrote down some of the negatives. And I went in and looked, and here we are. It was indeed that. And so I was within the next few days, I was speaking with Jim Moran, who's the vice president of the American Antiquarian Society. He's a neighbor of mine. And I mentioned this to him in passing. We were talking about something else. And he said, "Oh, I have a name for you." And he gave me the name of Professor Jeanette Greenwood, who had written a book called First Fruits of Freedom in 2009, which talked about the migration of Blacks from the South into the Worcester area as they were seeking equality. And so I contacted her twice. If she's listening, she knows I had to contact her twice, but that's okay. And the second time, because she had been on sabbatical, she got back to me. And I told her about this. And by then I had nearly 100 of them. I had been going through them. And she came out to my house the next day. And the rest is history, as I say, because she found people that she had written about and did not know photographs existed. And that allowed us to do so much research. So we became partners in the research and friends, and she is a tremendous researcher, and I learned so much from her in doing research and thousands of hours of research into all of that you're going to see. And it ended up in a big exhibit in 2017 for 4 months into 2018 at the Worcester Art Museum. And now we'll take a run through the area. Is this a map of Worcester that I had made up looking at Highland Street, Chandler Street, Main Street, to give you a frame of reference? If you look under the number 3 in the middle of the map, that is Memorial Hospital right there. And that gives you an idea of where these areas are. And the areas we're speaking about are the areas in which Bullard took the pictures. Beaver Brook was where he took the most pictures, but there was a smaller concentration in the John Street area near the John Street Church, which we'll see next. And then in the Laurel Clayton area where Memorial Hospital is, there was an area there with a small concentration of photographs being taken. If you look at that area, you'll quickly learn and know that that's where 290 goes through. And of course, we always try to take out the poorer areas when we're going for roads, and many of those areas were disrupted. This is more of a close-up map, an 1899 map. I put in dots, there would be more dots. I put in dots to signify different families and areas. So you can see that the Beaver Brook area, which is the one on the left, and you'll see more in a second. I'll give you a frame of reference. That's Park Ave. That's Chandler Street. Where they intersect, you'll see in a moment, that is where Walgreens is today. Over here is Beaver Brook. In the 20s, they kind of capsulated that and put it underground, so you won't see it if you're standing there today. Right here is Bill Bullard's house, not technically in the Beaver Brook area, I mean in the Beaver Brook section specifically, but just one street away. He lived on Mayfield Street. You can see it right under the arrow. In Bradford, right above the arrow. Well, when I was searching, Mayfield is now where Bradford is. And where Mayfield is in this map is now Maple Tree Lane. That's the kind of thing that makes a researcher crazy, by the way, just in case you want to do some of that research. There's Bill's house. It's still standing today. He lived at 5 Mayfield Street downstairs. I've been in the home. It hasn't changed much. I've got photographs in the home. I've got photographs in the home now and then, and it's nice to see that it hasn't changed a great deal structurally inside. This is the Bethel AME Church, the African Methodist Episcopal Church. It's gone, but that is the church that was serving this community at that time. And it was wooden, as you see. It is gone. It is now the home of Martin Tire on Park Ave across from National Glass. And this was the Reverend Perry, who was the pastor at that church. He lived at 13 Parker, right around the corner from that. And where he lived, that home is gone. It's an industrial building today. And here is another concentration I spoke about. That is the John Street Church, still standing today. And since this was a mixed neighborhood, I find that it works well. There are four little white girls and 2 black girls standing in front of the church. This is to give you a frame of reference of what we're talking about. We are looking right now, as we stand, we are looking up May Street towards Worcester State University, Worcester State College. Bill lived halfway up that street. About where it ends, you would take a left and he would be right there. And where are we today? Well, that's Park Ave. And you can tell that it's a main street because it's got trolley tracks in it. And it's got all the cobblestones around the trolley tracks. It's changed a little. This is where CVS is today. So that's all gone. And if we look the other way, CVS is right there. And that is the Harrington Richardson building. And the Harrington Richardson Arms Company, which left in 1984, was the maker of guns. A driller there was that very first picture I showed you, the opening picture of William Ward. He worked there. He had one of the jobs in the factory. Unusual for blacks to get those. They were mostly given the menial jobs. And back to Celia Perkins. This is her husband, Edward. She died in 1924, and you can see he passed away in 1920. They lived at 3 Bath Street, and where is that? Those homes are all gone. I'll show that in a moment. They were behind what is now Boston Donuts, behind what is now, for those of you familiar, behind what is now the Antonio's Pizza, and behind what is now Walgreen Drug. It's all grown up. It's all bushes. It's not taken care of at all. Here we have the same area, Edward Perkins on the right. And you can see collard greens. I did not know what they were. I had to ask. Tough Street is right near this. If you were to go stand on Park Ave and take a look back towards Austin Liquor and back towards Boston Donuts, you can see where Tough Street used to be. The street lights are still out in the middle of the bushes. Rose Perkins. Rose, you see right here, 2 other Perkins. Edward on the left, who was married to Celia, and you see Abraham. These are Rose and her brothers. Well, it's quite a story with them. They came from Camden, South Carolina, born into slavery. And this Rose came up here, migrated, and ended up owning her own home, again, over on Bath Street. Well, it's significant because they were the children. I'll tell you first about Letitia Perkins. Bullard often took pictures of tintypes. Well, this is a tintype of Letitia Perkins, date unknown of the tintype. The picture he took was around 1900 of it. She was the wife of King Perkins. This, again, is a picture you have not seen. He was born, and get a look at this, he was born in 1802, died April 11th, 1912. So he spent 61 years as a slave and 49 years in freedom. He fathered 23 children. Rose and her 2 brothers were 2 of them. The source for that would be where in Camden Chronicle, the newspaper in 1912, when when Jeanette went to Camden, South Carolina to do some research there, she was able to see the mulberry plantation where Letitia and King and these other individuals that we are speaking about were slaves, the slaves of James Chestnut. It was the Chestnut Mulberry Plantation. James Chestnut was a U.S. Senator and a chief senior advisor to the Jefferson Davis presidency, who was the president of the Confederacy. Here is Rose again, and I use this because they were part of the bike craze. And why was there a bike craze in Worcester, and especially in Worcester, but around the nation? Because we were the home of Major Taylor, Marshall Major Taylor, who was a black national champion with speed racing with a bicycle. If you were in Worcester, you can go down Major Taylor Boulevard. And if you go down towards the end of the boulevard, you will find a Black Lives Matter painted all the way across the road. And he is getting recognition finally that he did not get. All he got was a championship through much turmoil. And here's another picture of an unknown bicyclist right here. Whenever we can find those, we include them. There was no name included. There was no number on the negative. So we are quite often stuck. We're hoping that some tonight can look at these and say, I've seen that picture. I have it in an album. That's what we're hoping. We'll show you more later. But we're hoping that's the case. And here is a descendant, Kim Perkins. She was part of an advisory board that Jeanette and I put together, a People of Color Advisory Board, because this is a subject that we wanted to be sensitive to. We wanted people with knowledge, people who would help us. And she happened to also be a descendant, a great niece of Celia Perkins. And she just recently did an interview for us up there on a documentary that we're working on next to Celia's gravesite in Hope Cemetery, where a number of the individuals, the sitters, are buried. So this was at Worcester City Hall, October 13th, the day before the formal opening of the exhibit and at the Worcester Art Museum. And Professor Greenwood used her classes. Jeanette was great at having the classes put together, research by interviews, by studying, because she was teaching social history and what could have been a better source for their social history. You see, again, Kim Perkins and her sister. And this all ended up in the title to our exhibit was Rediscovering an American Community of Color. It'd be great if I could read my own title there. The photographs, William Bullard. There's Jeanette on the left, and of course me in the middle. And there is Nancy Burns, who was the curator of prints. And we're very grateful to the Worcester Art Museum for putting this on because they weren't originals. The negatives are original, but the prints had to be made from them. And for a prestigious art museum to make prints is a chance, and it got great attendance and it was pretty successful. There is the book that was put in a special plexiglass folder to protect it during the exhibit. And I took a page out so you could see his writing, his numbers on the left. And you can see 221, that's like Perkins with the bicycle that we saw before. And here is James and Jenny Johnson. James died the year this picture was taken in 1900. He was 51 years old. James was of African descent, also Nipmuc and Narragansett Native American descent. And right there, you get to see what the number would look like. It's backwards, but I wish they were all the size of that one when we're looking for them. Some could only be seen with a jeweler's loupe. Very difficult to read, but this one was large, the largest of all. And here is Susie and Harry Morris. We were able to find the grandchildren of each of them. The grandchildren of, the grandchild of Susie, we got to know, went to interviews. He goes by the name Strong Eagle. He's the maker of absolutely beautiful wooden flutes. That was quite a trip for us. Susie was an Arkless, Susie Arkless Morris, and she was also Narragansett descent. And here is a person, Eugene Shepard. He was a car cleaner. That was a pretty good job. You got to wear a uniform. You were in cleaning the cars and the trolleys and the trains. And he was of Nipmuc descent. This is a picture a negative that the experts have told us shows the quality of his work. Up in the back, you see the Worcester Fair in the 1902 poster. At the top, it says, President Roosevelt will be there at the Worcester Fair. And he did come and he did speak. That would be Teddy Roosevelt, 1902. This gentleman here was a coachman. He looked, it's just a wonderful, dignified, great looking photograph. But if you look at the technical aspect of it, they're using sulfur flash and all kinds of things that we would never think of using today. We have a smile on Margaret's face. That's a little unusual at that time. Many people think it's because it took so long to take the picture that they couldn't smile. Yes, in the very beginning it did. But by this time, no, it took a fraction of a second. You could smile, it just wasn't done. I guess you weren't supposed to be happy to have your picture taken, and I'll show you some children that would agree with that. But you look at the curtain, you look at all of it, the lace, for an interior picture, it's very difficult to do what he did. And there is what I was speaking about up there, the Worcester Fair. This is little Claude Clark. That seemed to be the community horse. Lots of people with pictures of the horse and on the horse. So I picked one that I really liked. I hope it was Claude's horse. But anyway, there was at 13 Dover Street. Again, if it's right across from Elm Park, it would be behind I believe it's Price Chopper today, the corner of Highland and Park Ave. The home, I believe the home still stands. There is no porch. And here's one of our favorite pictures. This is a picture that really kind of hooked the art museum because they liked the technical aspect of it, the framing, the angles. It's quite well done. This little guy was born 1897. He died in 1906. He never really got to be an adult. But looking at the picture, I can imagine he wasn't thrilled to be sitting there too long, dressed so stuffy. And again, he went and traveled. He went to different places. This is a great shot of a barber. Barber was a good job. That was a more lucrative job for a black man to have. And waiters at Green Hill. Both of these are encampments, 2 different dates, but both encampments. He also did encampments up there in 1914, 1904, 1917 was 2 different encampments at Green Hill Park in Worcester. And here we have James Harold Boot Ward. Boot being a nickname. He died at a young age of 1932. He grew up to be a musician, a drummer, a band leader. There are pictures of him later, just before he died, 1931. Bullard, of course, did not take those. This picture's not been seen before. And I spent a lot of time digging this one out. Doesn't look it, but it's about 6 inches down in the ground. And I had to go around probing until I found several that didn't belong to him. And there he is with his little drum. Well, we followed that up. We found his son, not his grandson, his son. This is his son. He went by the name Bud, James Harold Ward Jr. He passed away last year at 94. And over to the right, you see the senior again, another little picture with his brother and sister. Well, James Harold Jr., the person you're looking at on the left, rose up, lived in Worcester, rose up through the ranks of the Marriott Corporation. And when he retired, he was senior executive vice president of the Marriott hotel chain. So he did rather well for himself. And when we spoke to him about it and visiting him in DC, he was quite clear that he was tired of breaking barriers, that he had broken so many. Here is Lena and Blanche Jackson. Great little shot. These are the grandchildren of Bethany Veeney, who lived to be about 104, lived in Worcester, got to be known as Aunt Betty, born a slave, wrote the slave narratives, one of the slave narratives about her life as a slave. It's quite an interesting story. We went to visit her great-granddaughter. That would be Laura Pearson in the purple. And her daughter, Bonetta, still works with us, is a valuable member to me and does some talks with me and has been incredibly helpful in our research, and hopefully she will continue. Lena is her great-grandmother. Right here, we have Ray Schuyler and his children. This was one of the last photographs or negatives that I'd found, a great, great negative. It was in the exhibit. We were able to find grandchildren of the children, and we have 2 very helpful descendants, Larry and Nick Schuyler. Nick on the right, you can see him with the picture there. Nick on the right did a walk around the entire neighborhood with me for NPR when we were being interviewed for 2 hours, and it was amazing. He had grown up there and he had so many stories, really great stories that we're able to add. A lot of it we have, but again, tonight, if it feels like I'm not giving you a lot of information in each one, you would be right, because there are so many. I'm just trying to give you a sampling. There'll be more pictures at the end. What we're hoping to get tonight are people that recognize other people that we've shown or other stories, and you'll be able to contact us. That information will be put up on the screen later. I'm just trying to give you a sampling, and I know it's It's quite a bit at one time, but hang in there, there's more. There are the Schuylers. And you'll see right next to Nick on the right, the very far right, there is the picture. And they were photographed next to the picture. And here we have the descendants, many descendants, you know, marriages also, of course, in-laws. This is a great picture here of Lois Perkins Cato. By the way, of the Perkins, 36 of the 242 pictures are of Perkins relatives. You know, there's Eliza and Patsy and Mitty, there's just, and Angeline, there's just so many Perkins that it was able to, we were able to really research that greatly, and I'm appreciative of that. Lois lived in Boston. We're not sure if Lois is still living. She was over 90 when that was done. The family has not responded as we were looking for information for this. But the reason I put this in here is because the picture you're looking at that Lois has right there, she has. The family has the original that Bullard made and gave to them, sold to them. That's only happened twice. The other one we have is one in New York. The family brought it up so that we could take pictures of it and examine it. Only two. I have more than 100 original pictures from Bullard, but none of them are of blacks, people of color, and very few people. They're mostly of buildings, but I do have original pictures that he actually made in the darkroom. Over here on the right, you see William D. Perkins. That's Lois's dad. So she was thrilled to see it, thrilled to know that we had it. Great interview. Here is one of my very favorites. This is David Thompson Oswell, as you see. He was a barber, but mostly he was a musician. He was a pretty well-known musician. He's our earliest born person that I have a negative of, 1834. Others were earlier, but I don't have the negatives of them. He died in 1902, so he was 68 years old. He left behind very good genes, because you will see in a moment what that led to. Bullard must have known him pretty well. He must have had some connection, because he followed it all the way, the whole funeral, all the way down to the flowers. And here we have two sets of the flowers. On the left, we have a harp with a broken string that signifies a musician has died, a tradition at the time. We have one over here with strings in it, resembling what would have been a violin or viola. And another one here sitting on a mason jar. And where are these? Here they are. They're at Hope Cemetery. Now this, I'll show you in a moment, a different Hope Cemetery, but you can see there's nothing. There are no grave sites. In 1902, he's the first one there. David is the first, and he has family members buried, but the whole area is loaded. And it's not necessarily blacks. There are no black sections. And here, you can see they put stakes in the ground where they're going to be up at grave sites. And here is David Oswell's gravesite. You can see that its trees have grown up. It's not the same. Here is David Oswell's great-grandson, Dr. Raymond Thompson Jackson. And he is internationally known. He's a concert pianist. He's in his late 80s now. He was a professor for nearly 40 years at Howard University, traveled the world. He was a child prodigy. He was a doctorate student, a graduate of Juilliard, New England Conservatory. He's been everywhere, done everything. He's a wonderful, kind, gentle human being who can play the piano exceedingly well. We went down to see him in Silver Spring, Maryland, and had a wonderful interview. Spent the whole day there, Jeanette and I. He had never seen a picture of his great-grandfather. He idolized him. When he lived in Rhode Island, he would come up and put flowers on his grave every year. I do it for him now, and he appreciates it. He's a wonderful man. We've become friends. It's a great story in that not only did he get to learn about his great-grandfather, but Emma Jean Boyd and Joshua Allen Boyd from Alabama, who are the great-great-great-grandchildren of David Thompson Oswell, got to learn about him and meet Raymond Jackson. They didn't know each other. And now she is a child prodigy with a violin, and now he tutors her. He is in connection with her all the time. She's a little older now. She's a senior, like my granddaughter. And this has established what I think will be a very long relationship. And that alone is just wonderful to see. And by the way, to see him, to get a picture, to get a video, which we have of Raymond Jackson looking at the picture with tears in his eyes, having seen him for the first time at 83 years old and never having seen the picture, is worth all of it. It's such a wonderful experience for me, for Jeanette. Now we'll look into community and citizenship. What might they have done? Well, here's some community. He just labeled this as girls. Now I know there are 3 boys in there, 4 boys in there. In fact, we know who a few of the people are. We don't know who most are. Looks like after Sunday school, but it is on Tough Street, and it is at the Johnson home on Tough Street. He told us that, and that was helpful. Worcester schools are integrated, as I had mentioned earlier, that they went into the schools, and you see there's one black child on the right, and then we have over here 2 black children on the left. He only labeled these as Abbott Street School. It must be the class from Abbott Street School. The Abbott Street School was brick at the time they were going there. It was certainly integrated, but it was brick. We're thinking, this is my wife's idea, by the way, that possibly this is a visit to some mansion or some other place in the city that's going to require more. Maybe Bill Wallace, looking at this as director of the Worcester Historical Museum, recognizes what this could possibly be where they were. This was community. There were many organizations, but blacks weren't allowed. There were ceilings everywhere that they had to break through. And it was difficult to do, so they would sometimes start up their own group. And here we have a Knights of Pythias gentleman in uniform. It's an unusual picture for several reasons. We do not know his name. It's an unusual picture because we have very few pictures, white or black, where the man is holding the child. It's almost always the woman, again, stereotyping at that time, but there's a nice little set of what looks to be pearls and an adorable picture. This gentleman here was the one in the car, the one of Nipmuc origin. He also was a Knights of Pythias member. So I thought I would put the extra picture in to show you. And here's serving your community here. This is Reuben Griffin, taken in 1901. We're going to see more pictures of Reuben coming up. I tend to think that Reuben was very much familiar, comfortable with William Bullard. And you'll see why in a moment. He served in Company L, the all-black 6th Regiment, and was a Massachusetts volunteer militia person. He mustered out in January 21st, on January 21st of 1899. He was wounded. He did serve well. You'll see in a moment. This one just got found. I only found this one recently. I had labeled it, not realizing that it was a person of color, that it was a black man. I had labeled it long ago before I found this, this treasure trove before my granddaughter had made this discovery. And I had labeled this correctly, by the way, Man in the Woods. I don't like to be too complicated with my labels, Man in the Woods. And indeed, now it's been relabeled. You can see right here, Mass, M-A-S-S. That was the belt buckle that the Massachusetts Volunteers, and by the way, that Mass militia is now what we would call the National Guard. Here he is in his home, very unusual military picture, a little more formal, but in his home. This is not so formal. This is a very relaxed picture, smoking a pipe and doing some whittling. And here he is here with a mustache that he didn't have in the last picture, kind of casual, up against a tree. Great picture. Reuben ended up dying fairly young. He died in 1925, and he died at Oak Bluffs, Martha's Vineyard. He died as a custodian there. He was also a custodian, or as they were called in those days, a janitor at Worcester Boys Trade in Worcester in 1920. Worcester Boys Trade, as you know, didn't come along till 1909. And then they kept the building there for the next 100 years or so when it needed to be replaced. But that's a story for another whole day. And here he is again, 1900, with a battalion medal. Bill Bullard used to like to do this. Mix his pictures that he took, that he put a little mat around, straight cut mat, by the way, he didn't seem to have the tools for it. He would put those with other pictures that had been taken. They were called cabinet cards by people taken earlier. They started taking those in the 70s, late 60s, early 70s, cabinet cards. And the person in the upper right, this is the Becton family, as you can see, the person in the upper right was the older brother of Florence. Florence was born, her mother died when she was born. Mother died in childbirth. She was raised by her grandmother, and they lived at 52 Dewey Street in Worcester on the outer edge past the, what is generally considered Beaver Brook area. So in this picture, she's 10. This is a picture of Howard that was, you saw back here, upper right. Howard was in what I thought at the time was a football uniform. So I took a guess that it was a football uniform, and sure enough, research led to the discovery of his obituary in the paper. He died of acute nephritis in 1902 at 18 years old. And that is indeed a football. It's made of flowers, and it's sent by the Bancroft Athletic Club, of which he was a member. We've got a bunch of pictures coming up now that will take us a little bit of time, not too much. We'll be through them rather quickly, but we would love you to look at them closely. Tell your friends about them. This will be on YouTube. You'll be able to see this again, look at it slower. But help us identify more of Bullard's sitters. Sitters, of course, are the people he took the pictures of. He did not identify the following individuals in his logbook. And so I'd like to take you for a quick run through these individuals, and hopefully some of you will see them in albums. And I know none of you are old enough to have known some of these individuals. Now you'd have to be quite up in age, maybe 120 would do. So we're not expecting that, but we would like you to go through albums you might have at home. And if you have any unusual pictures or any pictures you'd like to share, the Worcester Historical Museum would love to make a copy and give you back your copy and get all the information they can for the Black History Project. This is a great shot. There's a building in the back that could lead us to know where this was. If the building is still standing, we could match it up. It will take more research, but we don't know who the person is. There is a number 5 on the right-hand side, and that number 5 leads us to believe that there were 4 other wagons beside this one, so it's a company. But quite often the company was on, and then you look at the poor horse, maybe the company wasn't doing well. The horse looks a little neglected in the food department, but we don't know. It's a great little picture. But we don't know who the little boy sitting on the mound is in 1904. Maybe he's in one of your albums. We'd love to know that. Now, as I said before, not everybody was smiling. And I don't think these people were thrilled, these little guys, girls, really wanted the picture taken. It's like, take the picture and go away, Mr. Bullard. It's got that look, doesn't it? This picture, again, is one that hasn't been seen before. You can get enough of the home, but it's just too difficult. You're looking at a picture here that's maybe 120 years old. And so for that to still have the same siding, I mean, it's really a sketch. The only thing we can do, and we've done that, and Jeanette and I have identified several, is to see another person that he did make a number to and be standing near this, and we match up the nails, match up the board, and count the bricks, count the stones, and say we know where the picture was taken. And then we go to the streets and we find out who might have been living at that home. And if we find then that there were two women at the home and we have the other woman, it can give us a fairly good guess as to who that person might be. We've done that several times. And a portrait like this could be helpful too. We don't know who the person is again, but it's an older picture, 1897. And we know that, I know that only because of the page that it would be on with the negatives. He did put dates on some pages. He did date some photographs clearly. You see in the background, it appears there's a little boy that wants in. And I think Bullard may have taken a picture later. I tried matching up that little face, but I couldn't. But a beautiful picture of a child, but who we don't know. And this is what's a split negative. Bullard had a lot of those. You would cover one side of the negative when you took a picture, and you could save if you didn't have enough with you, or you just wanted to save the glass. You could take a picture, especially the way this went. It would be, you wouldn't be able to do it so well with a landscape, but with this kind of pictures, he took a number of them. He even took some pictures where the person on the left was white and the person on the right was black. So that would tell you something, that they may have been next door. A lot of research was able to be done that way. This is another picture, 1897. That wall is probably still standing, but I suppose we could walk around the whole city looking for a wall. Maybe not. A great picture, again, dated, but don't know who. This one, some research did help me out. I do know that they're part of the Price family. And I know that because if you could blow up what's above the doorknob on the right-hand picture, you would see the J.W. Price. And then you see the 68 on the jamb, the door jamb on the right, up above, right below the red dot. Well, the number fell off. So we went looking, and we found through the street directory that there was a Price family living at 68 Abbott Street. That house is no longer standing. But those are the kinds of things that you do, and you spend 8 hours and you go, wow, that was worth it. And then sometimes you spend 8 hours and you find nothing. And that's the joy of research. Don't know this person either, but we surely would like to. And you know, it's quite a belt buckle. It looks nice. This wonderful picture of this young man. He looks like he's got a little bracelet on the left arm there too. Sometimes I scan them in at a very high resolution and it allows me to find much more. But remember, what you're seeing tonight is only a fraction of what's available and a fraction of the knowledge. There are hundreds of pages of information, and I'm just trying to take you through it to give you a quick preview. There will be other talks, hopefully in person. This one, she has a watch tucked in there. Maybe the watch has been passed down. Maybe someone has this picture. Please make sure to tell your neighbors and friends, your family members, to come and look at this on YouTube and see. This is one I really like. He looks to me, he's been identified, Mrs. We're not sure if it's Suter or Loudon. It's tough to look at his letters. It's a tough call sometimes, but this is her dad. It's identified as her father. She is more recognizable as a person of color. He looks to me like a man who looks like a Civil War soldier you might have seen. And maybe he was. Maybe he did serve. We certainly had the Black Regiment. One of the pictures is of Solomon Pierce, whose grandfather and uncles served in the Glory Regiment from Massachusetts. He did not. He was too young. But we have the negative. This is a great shot. I just love these pictures. It looked, though, with her little hand moving on the right, that she got startled by the flash, so it may be inside, like, what are you doing? This, I found the name. It was McGinty Carpenter. The youngster was identified as by him. I haven't been able to find much. It's a great name, McGinty Carpenter, but I don't know, and there's not enough there to research. He identified this boy as Lou Sawyer in his logbook. Good luck. We have done everything possible, changed the name around, every possible combination of the name, and cannot find it. Possibly. He looks so well-dressed, so great there, that he was just visiting. Said his name and got his picture taken. And this is a child very wary of Bill Bullard. What are you doing? Again, we don't know. And again, a wonderful little picture, and don't know. And we look at this picture, it's a mixed race picture taken, he did say Tatnick, it's in about 1906. And the woman with the guitar, there's so much here, and we just don't know what it is. And we know it was taken in Tatnick. Maybe that home is still standing. More research could tell us that. Wouldn't it be great if one of you came up with the picture like this, or with someone in this picture, in the picture you have? Wouldn't that be great? I would love it. You know, as I think about all these images and what they mean, they're all Worcester. But I must tell you, the images, I own the glass, the actual glass, but I'd like to think that the images will be able to be available for the descendants and for those doing the research forever, because they are in pristine condition. And I would love people to be able to research and to bring history to more people. It's such a great feeling that knowing you've been able to do this through research and be able to make a contribution to a people who migrated north, looking for equality, looking for fairness, and struggled mightily to find that. And we see even today, it's still a struggle in so many places. And I would like to see those images move forward. And the reason I say that is because it's just not a Worcester story. It's an American story. And you see this played out in so many places. We're just fortunate to have this collection, and I'm thrilled that I have it. And there's the rewards of research right there. That isn't everybody by any means, but that was a group we had that day at the Worcester Art Museum at the opening. There were many more. And you can see through at looking that there are groups that came together to get to know each other. And that is a great reward for me of research, and makes everything, all the thousands of hours, everything, it makes it meaningful to me. And with that, I would like to make sure you know that you can see more at bullardphotos.org. Clark has been so kind through all of this and given so much financially and in every other way. Their answer is always yes when I've gone, and when Jeanette, who teaches there, has gone to look for things. And thank you so much for watching across the country, former students, friends, relatives. Thank you so much for tuning in. And now we'll open it up to questions, and I will try to answer some. I would like to introduce Debbie Hall.
Well, thank you, Frank, and thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. I've seen some of the photos, and definitely we've talked and you've shared your photos, and I am still struck by just the beauty of the photos. So it's interesting to me, think about Frederick Douglass, who was the most photographed person of the 19th century. Even Abraham Lincoln wasn't photographed as much. But part of Frederick Douglass being photographed and having this photograph taken was surely about representation of Black people in America. And he said at once that Negroes can never have impartial portraits at the hands of white artists. He went on to say, it seems to us next to impossible for white men to take likenesses of Black men. So during this time period, around the time that Bullard was taking photos, in the late 1800s and early 1900s, in 1915, when Birth of a Nation came out, there was the problematic, to say the least, portrayal of Black folks and the depiction of Black folks. So it was important to him, W.B. Du Bois, Mary Church Terrell, that there were photos that reflected the true identity of Black Americans. So I want to start just with maybe your thoughts around this collection. Bill Bullard, obviously a white man who took photos. I find it interesting first that, you know, people of color represented and Black folks represented 1% of the population at the time that the photos were taken, but they represented 40% of folks sitting for photos. Why do you think that is? What would...
Well, We have, Jeanette and I have worked pretty hard on that one. That is, that's like a prime question. Why? Is it, did he feel for some, did he have friends in that neighborhood who were Black? We don't know. Did his grandfather give him information that made him care more? We don't know. There's not a lot of information on Bill Bullard. A little bit growing up, a little bit at the end, and in the middle, there's an awful lot of it missing, and we've spent untold hours searching for it. I wish I could answer that question. I'm only speculating to think that for some reason, his personality, looking at him, I'd like to think that he cared. He just simply was a person who had the type of character, who enjoyed going around taking pictures. He maybe felt a sense of satisfaction that individuals who were not getting their picture taken like other people, or maybe he took a few and word spread that, you know, hey, Bill will come to your house and take your picture. Pretty inexpensive. Some of them were 10 cents, 5 cents. I have no clear answer, and I wish I did.
Wonderful. They're beautiful photos. And so I do think they represent the humanness of the Black community. And I'm just so happy that we have them. I have a question from Chuck. And the question is, can you go into greater detail about the connection between the Native American community and the African American community?
That would, I think what we have a number of other pictures of people in the Native American community. We have contacted Cheryl Toney, who probably would do that justice a lot better than I could. She has done the research on that. Our section of it is rather small. We did indeed go to the Native American community. We reached out to them. We even went to the Strawberry Moon Festival that they had held and tried to learn as much. We did interviews, but that is, I simply don't have that information. I don't have enough information. I couldn't do it justice like Cheryl would be able to do. I would hate to speak for her.
Okay. And then we have another question from Elizabeth, who said, I learned that Worcester had its first African-American baseball team called the Puritans in the 1880s. This team was managed by Frederick Gimby, the son of Edward B. Gimby, the founder of AME Zion Church. Do you know if Bullard captured any photographs of Gimby and those players?
No, he did not. We were aware of that. We had researched that. And that leads me, he didn't, and that leads me to another answer. He also did not capture a picture of Bethany Vaney, who was extremely well known, who wrote the slave narrative. And she lived around the corner. She wrote the slave narrative on her life. He also did not capture a picture of, to me, one who everyone would have thought he would get would be Major Taylor. I mean, you have this tremendous figure present in your community. He did not capture a picture. But so looking into it, he did not go after pictures that we could see of extremely well-known, a couple of pastors. There were other people that he could have, that were, you know, more influential. He didn't seem to do that. You have David Oswell, who certainly was well-known, but he kind of an anomaly. He was looking for the people in the neighborhood, the average individuals who live near him and, you know, in the other areas also. Did not take a picture of them, no.
Did Bullard ever print any of his negatives himself? And did he have a darkroom? Do we know that?
He did not have what today we would say is a formal darkroom, but yes, he did print them himself. The best information we could find that there is some evidence that he was able to use a couple of dark rooms in the city. I'm thinking since George Morrill, who lived upstairs from him, had a small business on Main Street for a very short time, he probably used his for some. The rest of it was done in his home. And yes, he printed many. I have about 100. I don't know how many he printed. There's probably no way to know that. He did not print a picture from every negative. Most photographers would not do that. But he printed certainly in the thousands over the course of the year. And a lot of them are out there they're on the walls and pictures, but to get your hands on that original that he handed, no, don't see him.
We have a comment here from Rich. Says, I believe that Company L of the 6 Massachusetts Volunteers was Black. The other companies in the regiment were white, including his great-grandfather. He said, I think it was the only mixed race regiment in national service in the span.
And he's correct. He is correct. Yes.
That's interesting. The other thing I find interesting, you know, although in some northern cities there was definitely still segregation, but I'm struck by the kind of integration of schools.
Yes.
And particularly by that last photo where you have the mixed races, the races are black and white, and it's a really striking photo. And it says a lot about Worcester, I think, as a community. Did you find that, I find it odd, that you had black and white folks photographed together, or even in schools together, photographed together. I think it speaks.
Well, I can tell you an additional quick story on that has stuck with me quite a bit. There was a gentleman whose name was Stanley Guttridge. He died 2 years ago now at 100 years old. He was quite sharp, right up to 100. And we interviewed him a couple times. I got to know him very well. And so Stanley told me this story, and it'll give you an idea that we're only going to be so accommodating in Worcester. So I don't want to paint too rosy a picture of the fact that it was integrated. He went to Clark University, and in the mid-40s, he was looking for a job as an accountant. And so other people had called this accounting office, and that person would come, pick them up, take them for an interview from Clark, and then bring them back. So he told them that he would like the interview, and the man said, well, how will I know you? So I'll have a blue suit on. And so he pulled up, and then he noticed he not only had a blue suit, but he was black. So he said the man rolled the window down, said that he would have to come back tomorrow. He didn't know, but he did. He came back, he picked him up, he interviewed him. And Stanley told me, he said, but I didn't get the job. And I said, well, what did it bother you? What were your qualifications? How were you doing in school? You know, the normal things that a teacher would ask. He said, well, I was at Clark, I was the only black there. I was president of the class and class valedictorian, so that probably should have gotten me the job. And I said, well, it stuck with me. How did you feel? That's terrible. How did you feel? And he said, I didn't really feel much. That was life. That was my life every day. I couldn't think about that. My mother worked as an accountant in Boston for 12 years before she could get someone in Worcester to hire her. So those are stories that are painful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Bonetta Klufer, who helped you and assisted you in the research, has a comment. She says, I'm happy that my mother, Laura Pearson, was able to assist you on your journey to finding many of the descendants spoken of tonight. Many members of the Black community have lived in Worcester for generations. For those not so long here, who have not been here so long, your history still remains important. And as we look at these photos, the importance of the photos, and just having that as the history, part of the history, that we can even see these photos is so important. So thank you, Bonetta. I think you're watching, but thank you definitely for contributing to this, and your family and a number of descendants that are probably watching this right now. Can you tell us in closing, as we come to the end of this fantastic program, just a little bit more about your connection to the descendants that you were able to meet here in Worcester and what that was like.
Well, Bonetta has become a friend. I've met many, obviously. We have about 100 descendants. Kim Perkins, I've gotten to know well. For me, it's been a tremendous learning experience culturally, in addition to factually. I mean, it's easy to go look in a book and read something. It's another thing to listen to the person telling the story who has lived a piece of the story. One of those was Laura Pearson, Bonetta's mom, who had a nearly photographic memory. Every time I asked her another person, she knew the person's address and phone number in her head. And I said, well, would you call her? Oh, I haven't heard from her in 10 years. And I mean, those were stunning times. I think for me personally, and I can speak for Jeanette, she may be listening. I can speak for Jeanette in that it's so rewarding to learn. It's easy to write a book. It's easy to think you know, but it's so great to learn, to be able to give respect to the individuals and to get the respect back because you did. I have found that to be extremely rewarding to me. I have now, I would consider the gentleman in Silver Spring, Maryland, a friend. I'm in contact with him all the time. I put flowers on the grave of his great-grandfather simply because I can and he can't. And to me, that's not something I do for him. That's an honor for me to be able to do that. That's how I see it.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I see a interesting question here, and then I'm going to bring Bill Wallace on. I think you can answer this maybe quickly or at least think about it moving forward. But Mike asked the question, do you know what percentage of the Black sitters were children? That seems to have been a particular interest of Bullard's. So for example, Bethany Veeney's grandchildren show up in the collection, but not her.
About 25%.
What you have, there's the answer.
I just happen to know that because I counted them.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And there's so many other questions. As we bring the program to the close, we will have this video available for people to view, or folks who didn't have a chance. Please feel free to share with them. Additionally, at some point, we'll put back up the website you can go to learn more about the Bullard photos that appear towards the end of the presentation. So now we are grateful to Frank Morrill. Thank you so much, Frank, for the presentation. And it is now my pleasure to introduce Bill Wallace, Worcester Historical Museum's Executive Director.
Thank you, Deb. And thank you again on behalf of everyone here tonight. Sorry. I'll start again and apologize. Thank you, Deb, and thank you again, Frank, for this incredibly important presentation of this moment in Worcester's history. We're grateful to you. We're grateful to everyone who participated with us this evening. Since 1875, Worcester Historical Museum has been the keeper of the stories that make Worcester the exciting city that it is today. And we certainly saw some of those exciting stories tonight. In addition to following the Black History Project, I hope all of our listeners and viewers will also take your place in Worcester's history, not only by following the museum on Facebook and Instagram and watching this YouTube program again and again, but by thinking about your stories and how you too can take your place in the history of Worcester, inspired, share. As we've heard from Frank tonight, we are all living history and we need to record those stories of yesterday and 100 years ago for the generations that will follow us. When you share, what was yours becomes ours and Worcester becomes stronger for it. We're grateful to this evening's sponsors. On a national level, the National Endowment for the Humanities, Exploring the Human Endeavor. At the state level, the Massachusetts Cultural Council, which is so important to all of us in its efforts to promote excellence, access, education, diversity in the arts, humanities, and interpretive sciences, and various sorts of conversations and programs like the one you have just experienced tonight. The Mass Cultural Council's commitment to improving the quality of life in the Commonwealth is vital in these unprecedented times that we are all facing. And of course, at the local level, we thank the Worcester Together Fund, a joint effort of the Greater Worcester Community Foundation and the United Way of Central Massachusetts in their partnership with the City of Worcester. But also we thank the Fred Harris Daniels Foundation and our friends at the Railers Hockey Club for their important support of not only the Worcester Historical Museum, but specifically the Worcester Black History Project. Again, thank you all. Take your place in Worcester history. It's our city, it's our history, and together we are tomorrow's stories. Thank you for joining us. And thank you again, Frank.